So about 3 weeks ago, President Trump signed into law the Autism CARES Act, lending several $1 billion in support to people on the autism spectrum and their families. And joining us now to talk about this law, what it does, and where we could go from here is Ariva Martin, CNN contributor and legal analyst. Ariva, welcome to the show.
Hi, John, how are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm very glad to talk to you about this topic. And so I didn't see a lot of news about this law when it was passed. I think a lot of people might be unfamiliar with it. Can you basically summarize what the Autism CARES Act is designed to do?
Yeah, you're so correct, John, in that it got buried in all the political news because there's so much going on in Washington. But this is a really big deal. $1.8 billion have been allocated from the US government. The money primarily will go to the Center for Disease Control and the National Institute of Health. And the thought behind this is that over a 5-year period, these two organizations will receive the bulk of this money. And the money is to be used to address both research related issues and to get the money into communities that have been particularly underserved, as well as populations in the autism community that have been underserved. There's some specific language in the law about reaching adults who are chronically underserved, and then helping the families that care for individuals with autism. So this is a really big deal for the autism community, and I just want to thank you and your team for talking about it, because it should be talked about, and families need to know that the law was passed, that the funds have been appropriated through Congress, and that there's hope for a lot of families that often struggle getting the resources that they need.
Yeah. So when you hear a number like $1.8 billion, absent context, that seems like an incredible amount of money, but it does need to be put into context. And I honestly, I don't know. Activists in this area, researchers in this area, have they responded to this bill by saying $1.8 billion is in line with what is needed to accomplish their goals? How is the reception to the bill being passed been?
Well, unfortunately, I think the bill has been caught up in some of the political partisanship that we see on so much that comes out of Washington, D.C. I think there's a lot of skepticism, particularly in African American, Latino, and minority communities. Those communities have been woefully underserved when it comes to funding. I live in the state of California, and some of the work that I do, a lot of the work that I do is in California, and we've had huge disparities in governmental spending as it relates to autism treatment, diagnosis, and care. A lot of it based on zip codes where people actually live. So I think the reception has been muted. It's been, kind of a reserved reception. People are happy about it on one hand, but then there's this concern: how does that money get into communities that really need it? National Institute of Health, as you know, is this massive health organization. So what we're hoping doesn't happen is that most of that money ends up in research. Research is important, but also day-to-day services, those things that help individuals with autism, have a better quality of life. So we're hoping, and it's not really clear yet. I've had my team, I am the founder and president of a nonprofit special needs network. So I've had my team start to investigate how does community-based organizations, how do organizations like mine all over this country, access some of those funds. And to be honest with you, we haven't figured that out as of yet. But I encourage anyone that's listening to this, talk to your local congressperson, talk to individuals in your state government, because they should be helping coordinate how those funds get into the hands of people on the ground.
Certainly, certainly. And so I'm also interested in where do we go from here? The bill got passed, which stands out because it seems to be doing a pretty good job, and also because virtually nothing gets passed these days. So it's noteworthy for that reason.
Absolutely.
But also in terms of other things that could be done. So we saw that presidential candidate Andrew Yang, whose son is also on the spectrum, he talks about his universal basic income proposal as a way to value the work of people like his wife, who stays home and is there for his son. So that's one idea. So I'm curious about your thoughts about that. But then outside of that, what are some other efforts that can be undertaken in this area?
Well, first of all, I want to just say thank you and congratulate Andrew Yang for making the issue of autism so prominent in his campaign. Because when we have high-profile people like someone running for office of president talk about issues of disabilities, talk about things like autism and other related developmental disorders, it matters. Having those conversations, Senator Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and some of the other presidential candidates as well have been talking a lot about the disability community and disability rights. So I think we start by having the conversations, elevating the conversation, making the conversation around people with disabilities a national conversation. I like that Andrew Yang is talking about universal income. He is so correct that many, typically mothers, do quit their jobs to care for their children on the autism spectrum, primarily because the care is so intensive and so involved. It involves, lots of medical appointments, appointments with school districts, appointments with therapists. And some families find it impossible for a parent to be involved and to provide the kind of care that a child needs while maintaining a full-time job. Yeah. So just valuing the work that parents do who care for individuals with autism, I think is a really important thing to do in this country. Making the laws more flexible in terms of work, providing paid leave for family members who need to take time off to care for an individual with autism is also something that I think we should be looking at in this country. And I hope all of the candidates running for office will consider. Parents need more time to care for kids. One thing I can tell you, I'm a mom of a son on the spectrum. So I know this as an advocate, I know as a civil rights lawyer, I know it as a parent. Our kids are incredibly capable of learning and living productive lives, but they've got to get early diagnosis, early intervention, and they've got to have a community around them that provides the kind of supports they need to thrive. So I think as a nation, we need to think about how we value the lives of those with disabilities, not think of them as a burden or as people that can't be productive, but think about them as individuals who have tremendous capabilities to be tax-paying, law-abiding, productive members of our society.
I couldn't agree more. Reva Martin, founder of the nonprofit Special Needs Network, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thanks, John.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.